Okay, I'm gonna pull up the chat just in case and make sure the volume isn't up. Okay, I think we are good. And if I see you, or if you want to chat, then okay, then just go ahead and go into the chat. Again, this might be my last live, so there is that. And please let me know if you can hear me. Pretty sure I'm good, but just in case. All right, today I wanted to talk about things to avoid in meetings. I and many other people, because of the word we cannot say on YouTube, there's been a lot of virtual meetings, obviously video call meetings, and even phone call meetings with your either client or the place in which you work. And it's very new to a lot of people. What's great about this, and this is something that I've personally done, is that you can go ahead and now record yourself. Whereas before, you might not have been able to record the meeting and how you interact with other people and how you respond to other people and how you speak in a meeting. It was always easier for me simply because I was always remote or in a remote company, and therefore we always use Zoom well before the madness that is happening right now. And so I can always record and look back on my meetings, and that was a normal thing that I personally could do. But now you and most everybody has the opportunity to do that. Even when it comes to, if you're just socializing and talking to a friend, of course, please let them know that you're going to record the call or the meeting. In some places, like in America, you legally, state to state depends, but legally in the state of California, for example, you do have to let the other person know that you are recording, so you can't just go ahead and record a meeting without permission. It is illegal to do so in some countries and some states. So, and it's also just courtesy just to do so. So please do that before you go ahead and record anything. I wanted to point out 3 different things that I've noticed in general that people make huge mistakes of, and I absolutely hate it. So once you watch this, I really suggest that you watch, I'm going to put a playlist down below in which how you can improve upon certain areas. The third one, I'm going to tell you different ways that you can improve and frame it so you can just do better. But the first 2 is fairly obvious. So I'm just going to go right into it. The first one is filler words. Filler words, we've heard it over and over and over. It's just so easy to do, and it's so easy to do. It's one of those things that's because it's a way of you to buy time, and because you want to make sure that you're saying something at all times, perhaps, that it's easy for you to do filler words. This is something that you have to train over time. You have to notice it. And you almost, to a certain degree, have to hate hearing yourself say certain filler words. This is something that I personally did with words like you know and like. I still have to stop myself. I still have to stop myself and say, whoa, you're saying that filler word again. And we all have our favorite filler words that we tend to use if we're in an uncomfortable situation. Maybe we were put on the spot in a meeting and we got a little bit nervous. We got a little bit tilted. In that moment is when your practice, and hopefully you practice, your practice comes into place in which you don't sound dumb, essentially. You don't sound like you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're talking about, and people don't think to themselves, wow, why are we paying this person any money at all? Or why is this person on my team? Or worse yet, people not feeling like they can rely upon you as a team member. And that affects your future income, your possible current income if it's that bad. And also the dynamic in which people tend to have your back. When you're in a team and people have your back, everybody thrives. But when you're that one person that you're just on the outskirts, you're not going to thrive and you're always going to be left behind. So you want to make sure that people feel confident in what you have to say and therefore what you're doing, whether what you're doing is good or bad. Unfortunately, people will judge you based on your communication itself instead of not necessarily the work that you do. Although I do believe that at the end of the day, the work will show for itself. However, if people don't like to speak to you or they feel uncomfortable in how confident you are in your task, again, they're going to always prefer to have another teammate's back who has that kind of confidence and has that sureness in their voice. So make sure you work on your filler words. I'm going to link below the filler words video so you can go ahead and practice on that. And lazy words. Okay, lazy words. This is something that is something I'm currently really working on. And even right now, I just used a lazy word, something. It's one of those things where it acts as if it's a filler word, even though it's not. So filler word is something that you say in between a thought process, and you want to fill something in there. But a lazy word is a descriptive word, except you're not really being particular about what you're describing. For example, I like to use the word awesome. That sounds awesome. Or amazing. That sounds amazing. Instead of saying, that sounds like something that is the right fit for you. Even though I might mean the same exact thing, but by me saying that full sentence versus me saying that's amazing or that sounds amazing, it's a huge difference. And this is something Tim Ferriss pointed out, and Tim Ferriss is the author of the 4-Hour Work Week, but he pointed out in his own self with one of his videos he recently did, not as a learning lesson, but he was just reminding himself, oh wait, that's a lazy word. Let me use different words to describe what I'm actually saying or what I'm actually thinking about. And at that moment, I really realized that I do use lazy words quite often just because I almost want to get to the next thing. I want to get to the next subject. And I also feel that they simply understand what I'm saying. Now, oftentimes this is true in the fact that if I am doing a video call, let's say, or I'm in person, generally they get what I'm saying because they feel my body language, my tonality speaks for itself. However, especially when you're on a professional meeting, you definitely shouldn't necessarily just use the word awesome, but lazy words really go far because oftentimes you don't see the person. Even if you do technically you're in the same room as the people or you're technically on a video call, you might be on the side working on other things. You might be going down your Google Sheets, inserting something in or taking notes, and everybody's doing something on the side. And in that moment, they're really listening more so, or they're leaning more so on the words that you're saying. So if you're using lazy words or non-descriptive words, that really stands out. And you also miss an opportunity to truly express what you're trying to say. I use filler words a lot too. I have to stop that. Yeah. It's very easy to do. So that is a lazy word. Just try your best to do descriptive words instead of something like awesome, amazing, cool. Those are what we call lazy words. All right, third but not least, and this really, it depends on the situation, but getting to the point. Getting to the point of whatever idea you have or whatever concept that you're trying to put forth in a meeting or in a communication process. It's one thing when it's a social situation and you're trying to tell a whole storyline to get your point across. It's a whole other thing when, let's say, you're speaking to an independent contractor at work and you simply need to give them the task or your teammates and you simply need to let them know what exactly you want them to do. If you know yourself well enough to know that you like to have a little bit of a back and forth, then I would suggest that you write exactly what you need to know in order to move forward. So questions that you need to know in order to figure out what the next steps are, because sometimes you don't entirely know the whole entire picture. Therefore, you don't know what the next task should be. So I understand that. But write down the questions first before you get in on the meeting with the individual. And then you go ahead and go by process to let them know that you think, at the very least, you think this is what should be done. And you give them the opportunity to rebuttal that, but don't check in with them every second of every minute of what you're saying. Instead of checking in with them for everything after every sentence or every task, say your whole breadth of the task and then ask them if either they have any questions, or if you are the manager or you're leading them or you're training them, then of course you can always ask them to say exactly what you said and what they thought you really said, how they absorbed it. And of course, you probably know your teammates and how they function, how they work. So it's going to depend on each individual person. However, I do want to make sure that you really know what the point of the conversation is, even if you're not the leader. So I've had this where I had a client, and technically they're the clients, right? So you want to let them somewhat lead the conversation, but there's something called managing up. So even though technically, look, they're my clients, and so they have particular things that they want, and they want to talk it out, and they want to feel heard. And at a certain point, you as the independent contractor need to listen to them. However, some people just clearly take a long time. Maybe it takes them 30 minutes to 1 hour to express themselves because they feel like maybe you don't understand, maybe I need to express myself more. So I often interrupt the individual, and these are the times in which you can interrupt it. There's a art in which how to interrupt somebody in a conversation. But when I interrupt them, I always make sure I'm interrupting them with a question and a statement as well. So for example, Stephen, I hear that you're saying X. Am I right in that? And so instead of Stephen going through a whole entire storyline on what he's trying to say, he can say yes or no to the question. Now, oftentimes people who like to talk, they'll say yes and then they'll go on, or they'll say no and then they'll go on. So the key is to keep interrupting and going and going. And on top of that, if they keep going, then you want to frame the conversation either beforehand, if you can. Hey, look, I want to hit X, Y, and Z points in this meeting. I'm hoping we can get through this as quick as possible. And so now they know what the expectations are. If for some reason you're not able to do that because they like to take control, they want to frame it, and they're technically the lead of the meeting, then you can go ahead at one point do a subframe. And a subframe is, look, I think that in order to help this meeting and the points that I believe you're trying to hit, which is this, and that, I think we should really address A, B, and C. So that's a subframe that you can do. That's not trying to undermine the leader of the meeting, but you're trying to make sure that they go on the same track so the meeting is as efficient as possible. And then my favorite is a time reminder. So hopefully in the frame, you have some sort of time. If you have a meeting with no time and time in place, I've learned, of course, that is a horrible idea. And so you want to make sure that, hey, look, I have 30 minutes on this meeting, but I also would hope that based on what I see here, we can do this in 15 minutes. And then in between the time frames, if you feel like a subject is going too long or one point is going too long, then you can, of course, always go ahead. Hey, I just noticed that we're 10 minutes in, and I want to make sure we hit all the points of this meeting. And it's not saying, so let's move on, and so let's go ahead and you should stop. You're not saying that, but you're suggesting it. You're just suggesting that the fact that, hey, we're 10 minutes in, and I want to make sure we're on track and hit every point so this meeting is efficient and has a purpose to it. Don't say the last parts, but you're basically just saying the parts of the time. What time is it? Another 10 minutes go by? Hey, 10 minutes till the end of this meeting. I think we should also make sure we hit this point before our meeting is done. Okay, great. Let's move forward on the meeting. So those are the 3 things that I found were common mistakes, especially going into the craziness that is right now. And we're going on these meeting calls and video calls and phone calls where some people are just not used to it, and I'm used to people who are used to it. So it used to not be a problem, but now all of these people who are clearly not used to getting on a Zoom call or any type of meeting call, they're really having a massively difficult time. And it's just so obvious when you really haven't honed in on your meeting skills outside of work, as well as outside of the current condition, outside of the video calls. Because I promise you, if you're doing this in the video calls, you're doing something extremely similar in the real life meetings. You just don't realize it because it's not so in your face. Again, if you are on video calls, I suggest that you record it, just because you can look back at it and you could really see your true self, especially if you're on camera. You can see how you interact with people on camera, and I highly suggest it. Of course, if you want to have some tips on how to be more charismatic on camera, I will link those videos down below as well. And comment below what you thought about the meetings. I could do more about meetings, or of course about their communication skills. So I hope everybody's staying safe, staying home, and really making sure that you are doing your part in flattening the curve. And I will see you very soon. Bye.